The abandoned complex loomed overhead, a labyrinth of twisting hallways, underground tunnels, and dark basements. It was, at one time, the largest psychiatric hospital in the state. It consisted of 4 entirely separate buildings formed into a pattern like a cross. In the center of the 4 structures stood a fenced-in rec area. Rolls of razor wire covered all 3 of the tall, rusted fences surrounding the rec area. A no-man's land where staff would have walked ran between each of them. Rusted basketball hoops were driven into the cracked pavement. Ancient benches were scattered haphazardly around the area, many of them hanging askew and broken. Rolling hills covered in dark, silent woodlands surrounded the mental asylum. I saw about a dozen cars already parked in the front lot. Small crowds of people stood, giving anxious glances towards the buildings. They turned their heads as I pulled in, many glittering eyes following the progress of my truck as I parked it and got out. None of them looked older than 25. I walked over, stepping over the deep potholes in the parking lot that reminded me of small bomb craters. A spiderwebbing series of cracks ran through the entire parking lot, with much of the cement heaving and askew. Broken shards of glass from the smashed windows of the hospital shimmered on the edge of the lot, like thousands of twinkling stars. "Hey, new guy," one young girl with blonde braids and dark sunglasses cried. She wore a tight pink shirt and short shorts that left little to the imagination. "Over here, it's about to start in a few minutes. You better hurry up." I looked down at my watch, realizing she was right. We were all supposed to be there exactly at sunset. I had gotten lost trying to find the abandoned mental asylum, a fairly easy thing to do, seeing as many of the signs had long ago rusted away. I had left over an hour early, but after missing the small dirt road that wound up the hill towards the asylum, I had wandered in circles for miles through barely visible paths made of loose stones and flooded tire grooves. Breathless, I caught up with the group of people. I didn't see Mr. Beast here yet. I counted the crowd, realizing there were 12 people here, including myself. With Mr. Beast, that made 13. Just like the final supper, I thought to myself. "You almost missed the bus," the pretty blonde girl said, giving me a faint half smile. Her teeth glittered white like a movie star's. She was photogenic indeed, exactly the kind of face a major YouTube influencer would want in a competition. She held out a slight hand to me, and I shook it. "I'm Allie." "I'm Michael," I said, smiling. I glanced at the crowd, seeing it was about half male and half female. At that moment, a cheer went up. I looked around, confused. I saw everyone staring straight up. I heard the whoop 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 of helicopter blades slicing the air. The helicopter descended slowly, its exterior as bright red as a fire truck's. It had a giant image of Mr. Beast's face across the side, with the words "Beast Copter" beneath him. Hanging out the open door, the grinning face of Mr. Beast looked down on us. "Hello everyone," he cried as the helicopter lowered gracefully, its body spinning as a counterpoint to its whirring blades. It landed with a soft thud that shook the cracked parking lot beneath our feet. The crowd continued to clap and cheer, and I rapidly joined in, the feeling of elation and excitement becoming rapidly infectious. "Welcome to the competition." "We love you, Mr. Beast," one of the girls shouted, and the cheers grew louder. Mr. Beast's friends and crew got out, unloading equipment and a massive glass box filled with money. Mr. Beast turned to the nearest camera. He gave a thumbs up, the frantic crowd cheering in the background of the shot. "Would you spend the night in an abandoned mental asylum?" Mr. Beast asked the camera, his blue eyes twinkling as he gave a small, mischievous smile. "How about the week?" "Well, our contestants here have agreed to stay in the most haunted mental asylum in the history of the United States for as long as it takes. It has been abandoned for decades, and as you can see, its condition is somewhat suspect. It has thousands of feet of underground tunnels and many hundreds of rooms located across 4 buildings. Whoever lasts the longest without leaving the buildings wins $500,000. The crowd cheered as the camera panned to a locked glass box, 5 feet tall and 5 feet wide, filled to the brim with money, all of them $100 bills. All contestants will get a backpack filled with bottled water and a single flashlight, but no food, no blankets, no sleeping bags, absolutely nothing. The crowd's cheering instantly faded, and a few groans went up. But he put his finger up for emphasis. Scattered around the property are all of these things and much more. It's finders keepers and every man for himself. There are bundles of food, blankets, tents, clothes, and even bundles of cash hidden all across the 4 buildings and the underground tunnels. Mr. Beast looked at the rapidly fading sunlight. The razor-sharp edge of night had started to close in. "Alright, it's time to begin. Everyone through that door," Mr. Beast said, and the crowd started to filter into the building. I was at the back of the crowd next to Ellie. I looked the entire massive structure up and down. From the topmost floor, I saw a blackened face like twisting shadows peeking down, staring at me with melted eyes. In the dying sunlight, it peered over the edge, contrasting heavily with the bright colors all around it. I glanced up quickly, looking for any sign of the face, yet by the time I had, I found nothing there. As we entered, Mr. Beast's team gave us each a backpack. I took it, feeling the hefty weight of the thing. I zipped it open, seeing it was filled to the brim with bottled water. The first room we entered looked like it was once a massive waiting room, filled with the shattered remnants of desks and ancient, waterlogged books on lobotomies and electroshock therapy. We gathered around Mr. Beast in a semicircle as the cameras recorded us from all angles. "Welcome, everyone, to Whiting Psychiatric Hospital, or at least what's left of it. This is one of the largest abandoned mental hospitals still left standing in the entire country. It used to contain over 3,000 patients across all 4 buildings. You may or may not know its history, but Whiting had a long track record of suicides, murders, and strange disappearances that ultimately contributed to its shutting down. So here are the rules. There's 12 of you, and the last one to leave gets $500,000. You won't be given any food or supplies except for the water and the single flashlight in your packs. But there are supplies hidden around the complex. There are hundreds of cameras hidden all over the facility, but due to its size, we also ask that each of you wear a camera on your body at all times. Every 24 hours, we'll all meet up back here in this room, where you can trade in supplies that you found for other prizes and we can copy the footage. And that's really it. Are you guys ready or what? We all cheered. The team rolled in the $500,000 in the glass box and put it in the center of the front room as a reminder of what we were there for. Alright, then the contest starts now. Good luck everyone, and I hope I'll see you all still here tomorrow. After Mr. Beast finished speaking, all of us were given small, portable GoPro cameras, which we immediately put on. For a few minutes, we all milled around the main entrance room, giving nervous glances at the dark hallways that disappeared in the distance. Pieces of the ceiling were falling down, and debris and detritus littered the floors of the place. As I turned on my flashlight and looked down the hall, I saw the glinting of many glowing red eyes looking back. I started on down by myself, deciding to go exploring when pounding footsteps echoed behind me. I turned, seeing Ellie and another man, a young Asian guy with tattoos of dragons all over his muscular body. He had a shaved head and wore all black. "Michael, what are you doing? You're going off by yourself in this place," she asked, smiling. I nodded grimly. "What else? It's every man for himself after all. Mr. Beast said so himself," I answered, still walking down the hall. Dozens of rooms opened up on both sides of us, some filled with broken cabinets and pieces of tile that had collapsed from the ceiling. "It doesn't mean we can't team up temporarily," Allie said, rolling her eyes. "You'll go crazy if you get lost in this place by yourself, and we don't know how long this could go on. What if it goes on for a week or 2? You're going to stay by yourself in a potentially haunted asylum the entire time. By the way, this is Marco. He's fine." She indicated the young man with a lethargic wave of her hand. Far behind us, I heard voices scattering and fading away as the contestants began exploring various hallways of their own. "What's up?" Marco said to me. I nodded. "You guys creeped out yet, or what?" I asked. Marco laughed sarcastically at that. "The creepiest thing in this place are the rats and spiders," he said with bravado. "There's no such thing as ghosts or anything. I think we all know that." "No, I don't know that," Allie said. "No one's ever disproven them after all." "Yeah, and no one's ever disproven unicorns either," Marco said, rolling his eyes. We walked together in a tight group down the hall, our flashlights bobbing in chaotic patterns. A stairway opened up before us, spiraling down into the darkness. It had ventilated metal steps. An ancient, rusted sign covered in dust and debris said, "Basement." "I bet there's supplies down there," I said as we headed down the creaking steps. At the bottom of the stairs, we found a concrete room filled with broken crates and machinery. Allie began looking through the crates, flinging each one aside as she found nothing useful. Marco and I reached down to help when Allie gave a gasp. "I think I found something," she cried, flinging open the top of a black metal box only about a foot across. She looked inside for a long moment, her face turning pale. She dropped the metal box with a clatter and stumbled back, tripping. "What is it?" Marco asked in a worried tone, moving forward. I followed close behind him, glancing down at the black box. It stood open on the floor, its lid hanging askew. Inside, I saw a human foot. The skin still looked fresh and pink. Blood dripped from its ragged flesh, pooling on the bottom of the box. "What the fuck?" I cried. "What is this, some sort of sick joke? Does Mr. Beast think this is funny?" Allie shook her head as she lay on the floor, trembling and sick. "I don't think Mr. Beast has anything to do with this," she answered nervously. "I think we need to get out of here." "No way," Marco yelled angrily. "Haven't you ever watched his stuff? He tries to fake people out all the time. This is probably just some Halloween prop." As if to prove his point, he reached down into the box and grabbed the severed foot with his bare hand. He gave a startled gasp and released it, staring at the clotted blood sticking to his palm with disbelief. "Oh God, it's not a prop." He shook his hand frantically, sending dancing maggots and drops of blood flying off in all directions. "We need to get the police here," Allie said, her blue eyes widening. "All of us had our cell phones taken away at the beginning of the competition." "Alright, let's just turn around and head back towards," Marco began saying when a ragged breathing rang out in the shadows behind us. I spun, staring into the piles of crates and rusted machinery. My breathing came fast and shallow. The white LEDs of the flashlights bounced off the corners and detritus in rapid trails. Behind one large surge tank at the back of the boiler room, a blackened, cracked face peeked around the corner. It had a wide grin that showed off its white, straight teeth, the only contrast of color I saw in that burnt visage. When it realized that we had noticed it, it slowly disappeared behind the machinery, its body slinking away into the blackness. The stairs heading back up were in that direction, behind the machinery we had wound our way through when we first came down here looking for supplies. I looked behind me in panic, realizing that the room continued. A claustrophobic dark stairway heading down below the basement loomed only 20 feet or so behind us. "There's something there," I whispered nervously, keeping my voice as low as possible. Marco gave me a strange look, but Allie only nodded. "I saw it too," she whispered back. "Do you think this is all a joke? Maybe Mr. Beast is just fucking with us really bad for some reason." "I think that, regardless, I'm not going over there for all the money in the world," I said, backpedaling towards the stairs. "I have absolutely no desire to find out. Let's go this way. Maybe we can find another way to the exits. Then we can get some help and figure out what's really happening here." Down the cramped concrete stairs, we found a series of tunnels with metal pipes. The corridor split off into 4 different tunnels, each of them so short that we had to crouch to make our way through. "God, I hate small spaces," Marco groaned, looking visibly sweaty and shaken. "Are we going to talk about what the hell that thing even was?" Allie asked, her entire body trembling as if she were freezing to death. Her teeth still chattered, and in her eyes, I saw reflected the same existential and mortal terror I felt in this place of ghosts and shadows. "Well, you know what they say about this place," Marco said cryptically. Both Allie and I shook our heads. We continued to walk straight forwards through the cramped subterranean tunnels. I hoped it would come up into another one of the buildings soon, so we could call for help and find out why the hell a rotting, dismembered human foot was being kept in the basement. "You guys never heard what happened here?" "No, obviously not. Are you going to just keep stringing us along, or are you going to tell us?" Allie said, a bit of her old sarcastic self coming back. She made a feeble attempt to roll her eyes, but she was still too badly shaken from seeing the burnt man in the basement. "Well, there was a lot of shady shit going on here back in the day. Lots of unnecessary lobotomies, forced electroshock therapy, political prisoners kept here drooling on high doses of antipsychotics, even torture and suspicious deaths. They were always ruled as suicides, but people started to wonder and the patients were growing very unhappy. So one night, when the majority of the staff had left, the patients staged an uprising. They had made homemade weapons, pulling screws out of the walls and sharpening them and wrapping them in cloth, collecting discarded syringes and wrapping dozens of them together in tape, things like that. Just prison shanks really, but they worked. The nurses, doctors, and security guards were surprised and quickly overrun. The staff were all kept as prisoners, tortured for days on end as the police surrounded the asylum, trying to negotiate the release of the hostages. When the cops finally stormed it, they found all of the staff dead, many with their hearts cut out and their eyes removed. Their bodies all showed signs of extreme physical torture. Many had hydrochloric acid and bleach injected into their veins, as well as other, even more horrible things I'm not going to mention down here. Some of the doctors who performed the worst of the experiments were doused with chemicals and set on fire, left to slowly burn alive. Their blackened, tortured bodies were found by the police in the same surgical rooms where they had tortured so many patients with brutal treatments. When the police stormed the place, they were so horrified by what they found that they mowed the surviving patients down, shooting them one by one like dogs. By the time it was over, there were no living witnesses, Marco said, his voice echoing off into the distance down the snaking network of tunnels. "Shit," I whispered grimly. "This place is definitely haunted. How did no one tell me about this before I got here?" "Why would anyone think it was a good idea to come here?" Marco shrugged. "It's all about the views, man," he answered cynically. We heard voices off in the distance. For a moment, I thought it was some sort of vengeful spirit, like the burnt man we had seen in the basement. There was a pounding of footsteps that echoed through the cramped tunnels. Far off in the distance, we saw 4 of the other contestants. One of them, a young girl with black hair and pale skin, had blood all over her face and chest. One of her eyes hung askew from its socket, the optic nerve trailing back into her skull like a pale worm. "Oh God, they're after us," the man in the lead said. He was a tall, muscular black guy who looked like he was in his mid-20s. He dragged the injured girl behind him, his large body hunched over as he shuffled his way towards us. I heard a scream reverberate all around us, something that sounded like it came from the depths of hell. It split into many ghastly voices that wailed like the cries of banshees, their cacophonous shrieking overlapping and splitting in inhuman ways. Behind the group, something burnt and blackened in the shape of a man oozed over them, holding a sharp scalpel in its hand. Fresh blood dripped from the blade. Other pale, emaciated forms slunk in the shadows, twisting their naked bodies as they crawled forwards on all fours. Their black, rotted teeth gnashed and bit the air as a smell like a suppurating wound filled the tunnel. The group of eldritch monstrosities loped forwards, catching up quickly with the group. The burnt doctor swung his scalpel at the injured girl's neck. With a squeal like a strangled cat, it stabbed deeply into her flesh. Blood spurted from the wound in a spurting blossom that sprayed the muscular black guy in the face. He screamed, wiping at the crimson streaks that dripped from his eyes and into his mouth. One of the pale, crawling abominations leapt through the air and onto the black man's back. It sunk its sharp, rotted teeth into his neck. The man spun in circles as he screamed, trying to smash his back into the concrete walls surrounding him on all sides like a coffin. That was all I needed to see. Without a second thought, I turned and sprinted blindly away. After a few moments of hesitation, I heard Marco and Allie's heavy footsteps follow after me. Within moments, a few of the abominations had broken off from the main group feasting on the corpse of our fellow contestants. They loped towards, their strange bodies writhing and twisting. The pale, crawling ones had eyes like dying comets as they reflected the white glare of our flashlights. As blood dripped from their rotted mouths, they gnashed and bit at the air. I sprinted for my life with Marco and Allie close behind us. I heard the ragged, diseased breathing of the abominations drawing ever closer, like the death gasps of many dying bodies pressing together on all sides. Marco stumbled and fell. I glanced back as the pale, naked creatures crawled over his body, piling on top of him. They ripped into him with their teeth, dragging long strips of flesh and skin off his kicking, seizing body. His agonized screams followed, echoing down the chamber like the cries of the damned. "There's a light up ahead," I cried, a surge of hope like lightning blasting its way through my chest. Some dim, pale moonlight streamed down at the end of the tunnel. I glanced back, seeing the blackened, burnt bodies of the doctors stumbling close behind us, gleaming scalpels dripping with blood clenched tight in their undead hands. We sprinted up the stairs with Allie close at my heels. The burnt, undead corpses of the doctors stumbled forwards at an inhuman speed. I heard Allie give a cry of surprise and pain behind me. I glanced back, seeing a deep slash across her neck. The doctor was so close to me that he could have reached out and touched me. "He got me," Allie screamed as crimson rivers flowed down her pale, perfect skin. The pain seemed to give her a shot of adrenaline. She tore off in front of me, winding her way up the stairs. In front of us loomed a basement, a boiler room filled with surge pumps and all sorts of ancient, rusted machinery. The diseased breathing of the doctors seemed to tickle the back of my neck. I weaved through the machinery, seeing Allie in front of me, holding something long and black, covered in streaks of rust. I realized it was a metal pipe she must have just found laying on the basement floor. "Come on," she screamed. "It's right behind you." She waited like a baseball player about to go for the ball. I sprinted past her and she swung the pipe. It whirred through the air. I heard a cracking of bone and the ring of metal. Allie stood over the body of an undead doctor. Its head was caved in. Its skull looked like a smashed pumpkin. Maggots and rotting brains oozed out of the crater in its head. "I did it," she cried triumphantly. "I killed." Her cry was cut off as another blackened figure slunk around behind her. She turned at the last moment. A panicked scream ripped its way out of her throat. It was cut off as the scalpel sliced her neck wide open. A waterfall of fresh blood soaked her pink clothes in clinging crimson streaks. She stumbled forward, clutching at her neck as a strangled sound like a drowning gurgle bubbled from her throat. Without looking back, I ran up the stairs and down the hallways. I saw the doors at the end. Just as I got near, a pale face with rotting teeth peered around the corner from the nearest room, grinning. I stopped in my tracks as it scampered out, followed by a few more of the naked, crawling abominations. I turned, deciding to run in the opposite direction, but down at the end of the hallway, I caught a glimpse of a blackened body writhing towards me on twisting legs with a long scalpel clenched tightly in its rotted hand. As the creatures closed in on me from both sides, the door at the end of the hallway opened suddenly, slamming against the concrete with a booming echo. The pale creatures turned as Mr. Beast and his crew ran in, each holding a long, black shotgun. They racked them as they ran forward, aiming at the pale creatures with the cataract eyes that surrounded me. They fired. The gunshots echoed like bomb blasts through the narrow hallways, and the creatures' heads disintegrated into bone splinters and rotting gore. As a path opened up, I ran towards the exit. Mr. Beast motioned me forward frantically. "You need to get out of here," he screamed at me, turning to cover my retreat. "Something's gone wrong. Everyone's dying." I said nothing. I didn't need to. I knew. I had seen it all myself after all. As we made it outside, Mr. Beast threw his shotgun to the side in disgust. It landed on the grass with a dull thud. Under the pale moonlight streaming down through the clouds, he bent over, retching. His face looked pale and sweaty. He rose unsteadily. Mr. Beast grabbed his temples, a look of stress and utter hopelessness crossing his face that I had never seen before. The mask of confidence and joviality he always wore cracked, revealing the true man hiding underneath. "God, this all went so wrong," he whispered to himself. "They're all dead, aren't they? It's just you left." I nodded grimly. Mr. Beast turned, pulling at his hair. "Fuck," he cried, pacing in circles. He stopped suddenly, looking up at me. "Wait a minute. This might not be so bad. Everyone will want to watch this, right? Hundreds of millions of people will want to see what happened here tonight." I could only stare at him, dumbfounded. Marco's cynical words came back to me then, echoing through my head like the fading cries of the damned. It's all about the views, man.